Welcome, everybody. If you joined us last time, this is kind of a follow-up to the first conversation Curtis and I had. First conversation was all about like, what is a workflow conceptually? We got a ton of feedback from everybody about like, how do we actually build a workflow? So that's what we're going to get into today. For those of you who I do not know, my name is Kate Guillen. I'm the founder of Simplicity Ops, and I'm joined today by my friend Curtis, who is the Redtail workflow guru. Curtis, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
I've somewhat dubbed myself as the workflow wizard, but that's only because I think I was here first to claim the title. We have lots of amazing other trainers at Redtail who are just as well versed, but I'm keeping that title as long as I can.
As you should. I've learned a lot from you over the last couple of years, and I'm grateful for your friendship and for joining, me today and sharing your knowledge with our community. So, that being said, here's what Curtis and I are going to talk about today. The idea of workflow whiteboarding and its importance, the difference between steps and tasks in a workflow, what in the world is a target date and why does it screw everybody up? Why do we have roles, teams, users, and creating users, and best practice on when to use what when? Then we're actually going to build a review meeting workflow from scratch, talk about bringing all of this to life. How do we use outcomes? Some of the bells and whistles in workflows like email templates and hyperlinking. And then I'm actually going to use my calendar software to launch the review meeting workflow upon scheduling and show, I can kind of just bring it all to life and show how it actually flows. Okay, I see we got a couple of questions coming in. I will answer these at the end. We'll get through all of this first, and then Curtis and I will kind of hack through some of the questions. But yes, this webinar is going to be recorded. And we will be sending out the recording to everybody in attendance and anybody who is registered who maybe isn't able to attend today. So, Curtis, keep your eye on those questions too. If there's anything you want to stop me, I'll do my best to multitask here, but you know how that goes. All right, guys. So first and foremost, let's talk about workflow whiteboarding. And as unexciting maybe as this first step is, it is absolutely vital to the success of your workflow. And so workflow whiteboarding is, kind of how it was explained to me at an RTU that Curtis was actually running, is like literally like whiteboarding on a whiteboard, the process, the steps, the tasks, who's doing what, kind of get the flow in place. Curtis, I'd love to know your thoughts on why is this important and why would you recommend not skipping this, although it sounds like a kind of pain in the butt task?
Yeah, like to me, the idea of trying to build a workflow without whiteboarding first is essentially saying, I'm going to go on a road trip, but I'm not going to map out where I'm going. It's just like, that's what the whiteboarding part is for. It's just saying like, hey, where do we need to go in this process to make sure that we're going to hit everything we need? I think even one of my favorite stories to tell at a Redtail University, I tell it every once in a while. One of our, he's been a trainer. He's actually now director of brand experience, Ricky Redtail, good friend of mine. He is a big part of the Redtail University, this event that we put on almost every month. And a few years ago, he had this great idea of, hey, this is an event. It's a thing that we do with certain tasks and things need to happen the same way every single time. We should build a workflow. And he built out the workflow on his own without asking everybody else who was part of the process. And it's like, I'm going to say it was not a bad workflow. But it was missing a lot of things that were very important. Like he didn't know certain things got done about even like printing out, getting the name tags and the workbook set up in a certain way. And again, like he could have used that workflow, but it would have really just been for himself. Like he didn't involve, the other teammates. Now we have moved past that. We got to sit down again and just say, hey, like, what do we actually need to build this out? And it just makes that event more successful. Like things don't fall through the cracks because of it.
I love that example. And there's so many benefits in involving your team. When it comes to, we're going to use the review meeting as an example. And this is just like a Word document that we use to whiteboard the workflow. And I'm going to involve all of the people on my team that are part of this review meeting process for all the reasons that you just explained. So that I can get, eyes on and then hear from the feedback of like, what is everybody doing in this process?
Yep.
Identify like redundancies and things maybe we can cut out or things we can better delegate to other people or streamline. And also, you and I were talking before we started here, the benefit of involving the team is giving everybody a little bit of ownership.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. But yeah, like absolutely, like involving everybody is giving them a voice in the process. Because I've seen processes that I'm involved in now that, you know, maybe I would change them a little bit. And in the back of my head, it's if I keep thinking, oh, I don't like doing this way as I'm like completing a task, I'm not as drawn into that process.
Right.
You know, even if you've had a process established, you know, the whiteboarding process should never stop. You know, like, hey, maybe quarterly or yearly, we're looking at these processes. So even if there's new team members who weren't in the original whiteboarding process, they still have the ability to give their own voice. Because again, if you are part of building something, you want to see it succeed.
It's how you get adoption.
Absolutely.
And so it starts with this, you know, the rough drafting of the workflow. And so a couple of things that I want to point out here. We've jotted down our steps. We're going to get into our tasks. We're going to talk about the target dates and how to make the workflow follow a sequential order. And so a couple of key things I want to mention here is the target date. And so the target date is the date that the meeting is going to, the target date for a workflow that corresponds with a meeting is the date of that meeting. So the date of the meeting is the focal point of the workflow, and everything focuses around that date. So the prep happens, in this example, 3 days before. Then, you know, the meeting happens on the target date. And then there's things that happen after the target date. So the target date for any workflow that has to do with a meeting is the date of that meeting.
Absolutely. Yes. And that target date can sit at different places. And I will say for anybody who's building, you know, a workflow specifically to support a meeting, absolutely. The target date should always be the same day as the meeting because that's the most important date.
Right.
But what that target date is doing is each of the steps. So I have like step 1, step 2, step 3. Each of those steps is due either before, during, or on the target date.
Exactly.
And so if I'm starting the target date as day 1, but the meeting is 2 weeks away, but maybe their calendar changes, maybe it's a week away, like that is going to change. So what's going to help us set the due date is the meeting date.
Right. And I'm going to throw a wrench in this a little bit. If the workflow is to manage like a client request, you know, depositing a check or opening a new account or changing a Benny, the target date is today. So today you prepare the paperwork. Today you send it out. A week from the target date, you're going to make sure you get it back and submit it to the custodian. So we use target dates a couple different ways, but for this example, the target date is the date of this review meeting. Okay. Absolutely. So 3 days before we're going to prep. And so to prep, we need to like review their notes. We need to review their activities. We need to review their plan, put together the agenda. You guys can see my list here. The person, we can, so the steps follow a sequential order. This is the roadmap that Curtis is talking about. So step 1 needs to happen before step 2, needs to happen before step 3. The tasks within the step can be done in any order, and they can be done by multiple people on the team. So task 1 needs to be done by Curtis, and I can simultaneously be working on my task that is in step 1. Okay. And so I'm going to kind of explain here. Step 1, we're going to prep, and we have this task assigned to the client service person on our team. I'll get into roles, teams, and users here in just a second when I actually jump into Redtail, but I want to show you here the bones of the workflow. Step 1. Okay. There's a couple of outcomes. The beautiful thing about a workflow is, we're talking about maps, you can come to a fork in the road, right? And at that fork, you can go one way or another. And in this example, we have both in-person and virtual meetings. So in order to make this workflow bypass this conference room step, we have outcomes. So I can literally bypass the in-person component and move forward to the post-meeting follow-up stuff by using that outcome.
Yeah.
All right. And so I think it's helpful to see all of this actually in Redtail, but I wanted to show you guys an example of a workflow whiteboarding document that we use to rough draft this process first. This will be available to everybody after this webinar if you want to use it to, start to jot down your own processes. But you can see here, I just basically bulleted out all the steps, all of the tasks, because in my opinion, earmuffs, Curtis, writing workflows directly in Redtail first is not advisable.
I absolutely agree with that. I have seen many people just try and build out in the template and fail. Well, not necessarily fail, but like get sort of overwhelmed, like
Yes.
with how it goes. If you do not have that mapped out, like it's really going to be just a more difficult time building it. It's sort of like trying to build, like I said, like that road trip on the fly.
Yeah.
I think actually you use similar examples or sort of analogies about like if I have to like run some errands, especially, and I think we talked about this last one. If you think about the step as like high level, it's one step at a time. If I need to go to the grocery store, then I need to go to the pet store, and then I need to go to the hardware store. Like I can only be at one of those at each each time. Or sorry, I can only be at those one at a time. And then even you mentioned, hey, if multiple people are assigned to the tasks, well, the tasks in the grocery store are, I need to get milk, get eggs, get bread. You do not need to, if two people are going to the grocery store, we do not need to walk to the milk together, then walk to the eggs together. Like you don't have to. I mean, most people do, but if let's say it's Sunday at 1 o'clock and you're at Costco, and it's just, you need to get in and out, you're going to probably divide and conquer.
Right.
And so especially with the task not having to be in order, if I get the milk, somebody else can get the eggs. I don't have to wait for them to do my option. Now, let's say that we're at Costco. When we're talking about those outcomes, well, we want to go from the grocery store to the pet store and then to the hardware store. Like that's our perfect world scenario. But when we're talking about a fork in the road, like I need to go a different direction.
Right.
Let's say that if I'm at Costco and I see that, hey, they have my dog food and the cat food that I need to get, I no longer need to go to the pet store. And so those outcomes give me the option to say, skip over the pet store and go to the hardware store. Because I don't want to get those in step one and then have to say, oh, do this again. Like it doesn't make sense. Like the outcomes allow you to actually control the direction as you're going from step to step.
Yeah, those are perfect examples. And I'm going to show you now in Redtail why Curtis and I both say to whiteboard them first, because although the workflow templates work, they are not the most user-friendly thing in the world, and they're not easily manipulatable. So if you're trying to like rough draft the process, do it on a Word doc first. So I'm going to go to my workflow templates here by clicking on my name, going to manage your account. Here's all kind of like the back end things in Redtail, including all of your templates, where my workflow templates live. All right. And so I'm literally going to create a new workflow from scratch here. You can see all the workflows that I've already created. You can see how pretty they are. You can see the name of them. You can see the description that we have here. You can see that they've got categories. All right. I'll get into all of this in just a second. This is what a really pretty database looks like.
I have to say, Kate, how the naming conventions and how you have the order for your workflow templates is the best I've ever seen.
We're a little particular. So let's create one from scratch here. And so today we are, oopsie daisy. Let me go back here for a second. I opened the wrong one, Curtis. Of course I did.
Oh, no worries.
I got my little cheat sheet on the side here, you guys. Cool hack here. You can actually search for your templates because as you see, I've got a lot of workflow templates here. And I want to open this guy up as my little cheat sheet. All right, let's do this thing. So here we go. This is a blank slate. We're going to put in some information here to start to build out this workflow. But the first thing is, what is the name of this workflow? Well, hold on, let me close out this chat. The name of this workflow is the review meeting workflow. So we're going to call it what it is. I like this. You have a couple different statuses you can select here. The initial, building of this workflow, and why I think this is important is keeping it under construction until it's actually complete, so it doesn't show up as an available workflow for your team to use while it's under construction.
Yeah,
It's very confusing to launch a workflow that's like midway done or partway done. It'll build mistrust because it doesn't actually work. So keep it under construction until you've given it, until you've thoroughly built out the framework.
I can agree with that. There's I do a lot of, well, I mean, I do training constantly, but we use a trainer database and multiple trainers in there. And sometimes I'll be like, let's start the client review workflow and not realize that they only half built it out kind of thing. I'm like, oh no. But that is, again, keep it under construction until it's ready to go. Just make sure everybody is aware that, hey, we are still building on this. It's still in the whiteboarding phase.
Yeah, I agree with you. I gotta ask you, what in the world does owner mean? It is not something we use. I've never found it super valuable. Give me some insights here.
Yeah, owner is a field that allows you to essentially, I mean, take ownership of that workflow itself. Most of the time when I tell people, I normally ask the question, do you have multiple advisors in your office?
Got it.
Because most of the time, if you say, hey, I want to just focus on advisor A's workflows versus advisor B's, the owner field does allow you to sort and to say, hey, show me this.
Okay.
The other benefit is you can assign it to a team instead of just individual users. So maybe if it's like an internal process that like the client service team is responsible for, it just, again, just gives more ownership for who should be really focusing on that. And just to be clear, if you're the owner, does not mean you're responsible for every single task, but you are responsible to sort of making sure that it does get pushed through.
Okay, that's helpful. I still don't use it. I think it's an additional click that we don't really need. There's other ways to report on workflows. So
yeah. I will say in all honesty,
as you please.
In all honesty, if you don't want to use it, like you don't need to. It is one of those fields that is not necessary, but it can be beneficial for some people.
Category. We use category. It corresponds with the note category, activity category, trying to keep everything succinct so that we can run reports on this information.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that anytime a workflow, like at the end of the whole process, when you mark it as fully complete, a note will be created in Redtail and it's going to use this category. So if you want to make sure that your note reporting is accurate, this is the category you want to select.
Bada boom. All right. I put this in as 0 because we're going to use an automation to launch this workflow. And if you weren't using an automation, is my thinking correct, Curtis, that if you were to launch the workflow manually, you would put in the target date. So this doesn't really matter.
Actually, I wouldn't even put a 0 there. So
okay.
I leave this section blank, and this is only if your workflow is based around a meeting. So when we talked about that target date being the most important date, that's what this is doing, is if you want the system to set the target date for you. But
I understand.
If your workflow is based around a meeting, again, like, I don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. I don't want to have the system set the target date as always 2 weeks later. I need the meeting to decide that. So in the case of if you saying, hey, we're starting this workflow, we don't know when that date is, this is just a template. We are building out a template. So what it's trying to do is fill out a field that is available to choose manually as well. Every single one of these, you can change the owner, the category, the target date when you're manually starting a workflow. But if you don't want it to automatically choose something, you do not have to put something there.
Great. Then we're going to leave it out. That's how we build ours. There's a question here about how to add the category. So these categories are pulling from
the activity and note categories. Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the drop downs. It's not listed as a workflow category, but we use the same as the note categories.
Yeah. So as long as those note categories are in, the back end is I guess
it's under the manager account for like the managed database list section.
Yeah, manager account, manage database lists. And you can go to your
activities and notes. So right there where it says categories, that's the one where it says categories there. Again, like that is, it's just using the same one. And the reason being, again, because this is what creates the note. So it's using the note category.
There you go. All right. So now in the description, this is why my the surface of my workflow page looks so pretty. I want to put a little cheat sheet in here. I want to make this relatively foolproof. So when I get a new hire, They know exactly how we operate. We're going to use this workflow when a review meeting has been scheduled and the target date equals the date of the meeting.
I think what you did there with the description is actually one of the most beneficial things. My co-presenter, Aubrey Jones, she always likes to say this, to be unclear is to be unkind.
Yes.
So we want to be kind. And so just putting something of saying, hey, the target date is the day of the meeting, or the target date is the day the process starts. You know, things like that is just being very clear for what this is used for. So that way there is no confusion.
I completely agree with you. And so here is how we build out a workflow. All right. You can see in the gray bar here, here's the first step. Curtis and I are in agreement here. When I build a workflow, I go to my workflow whiteboarding document and I'm like, all right, sweet. So there are 3 steps. I'm just going to add all 3 steps right now. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. And now I'm going to go up to step 1 and figure out what all my tasks need to be. And I'm going to fill all those in. So based on my workflow whiteboarding document, the very first step is the prep. All right. And we said the review meeting prep is going to happen 3 days before the target date. All right. So literally, when this meeting gets scheduled next Tuesday, 3 days before, this prep is going to come up. All right. And so here's what needs to happen. We got to prepare all the documents. We got to, I'm going to put in the description here, and then we're going to talk about the assignee. So the review meeting prep needs to happen 3 days before. Here's what the review meeting prep means. Okay. We already went through this. We got to look at the notes, this and this and this and this. We need someone on our team to do this. Okay. So this is how we make workflows pass hands. Curtis is going to do the first task. I'm going to do the second task. John on my team is going to do the next task. Okay. The assignees, these are our options: user, team, role, creating user. I said this, Curtis cringed. We don't ever use user under any circumstance ever, because in my experience, users change. And if I put the user today as me, and I move on to a planning role from a CSA role, or I quit, or I, move on to do something else, I have to go through every single task in this workflow and add the new person. And I think that is wildly inefficient, because there's a better way to do it. Curtis cringed at that. Tell me your alternative opinion.
I will say, yes, I did kind of cringe. Cringe makes it seem like I was thrown off, but no, I totally understand like the reason for that. I would say, like, I do see people use, the user option, because there are some offices where they're like, this is where I'm set, this is what I'm doing, this is my only role, I plan to retire at this job, things like that. But then that also comes into, like, if you do retire, somebody else is going to take that role. And so even though you can assign it to a user, I definitely see the benefit of a team. And I think what throws me off, and I think a lot of it is, a team can just be a team of one person.
Yes.
Like, people will hear team and think there needs to be multiple, but if it's a team of one person, like, hey, let's say there's just one trainer and it's just me, I'm the training team, And so I need to make sure I'm responsible for it, whatever. But if I get other people involved in the team, the benefit here is I can just add them to the team without having to edit anything else about the workflow. So I definitely do see the benefit of when you're saying never use user. But for those offices, that are, listening and saying like, well, we use it, like, maybe you have just like 3 people in your office and you don't ever plan on changing that, growing. If that's the situation, I say, yeah, use user. But most people, there's going to be changes. Change is inevitable. We can never get away from that. And, we want to grow. If your office is wanting to grow, add people, assigning to a team is just going to be easier to maneuver in the long run.
And so the way I think about teams, I'm going to take that a step further. A team is a single person, and I'll explain why in a second. A team, although Redtail calls it team, we cannot amend this title, but a team is a single person that does something firm-wide. So it's your operations person, it's your portfolio manager, it's your, maybe you have a single client service person. Okay, you can see some examples here. I do not put multiple people on teams. If you need, okay, if that's the case, then I want to be more organized and I want to better, like, I want to have more clear role delineation and I want to use roles, which I'm going to get into in just a second, because when you have multiple people on teams, Curtis and I are both now getting this task, and Curtis and I have to communicate unnecessarily and say, you're it, no, you're it, or I assume Curtis is doing it, Curtis assumes I'm doing it, and it never gets done. That has been my personal experience. So when we work with firms, we take it a step further. We get really clear on who's doing what. And if it makes sense for Curtis to do all of the meeting prep for all of our clients, then Curtis is the client service team that does meeting prep for all of our clients. If we need to divide and conquer, okay, if we need to divide and conquer, and Curtis actually does it for the tier 1 clients and I do it for the tier 2 clients, then we use roles. And roles are contact specific. So Curtis is the client service person on all of the tier 1 clients. So any workflow that gets launched for a tier 1 client goes to Curtis. Curtis and I don't have to play, you're it, I'm it, nose goes. We don't have to play that game. It's clear. We've defined that Curtis does all tier 1s, I do all tier 2s. So Curtis's workflows go to him, my workflows go to me, because the role that we've assigned at the template level is contact specific.
Absolutely. And I would even like to build onto that as well. Before roles were a thing, like it used to just be assigned a user or team. But before roles were a thing, we would see offices say they have 3 advisors in, and they would have to build 3 different workflows, because if it's advisor A's, they have certain people doing the tasks for them, but advisor B has a different staff. And so the benefit of role is like, hey, if it's assigned to the contact,
right,
you can change who gets that. So that way you just have one template as
yep.
opposed to 3 templates and being like, well, which one do we need to start? We have to look at that contact. It's now taking way more, brain power than actually needs to be. And the role just helps assign it.
I like that. And then the last option here is creating user, which I also love. And creating user literally means whoever launches this workflow, the workflow goes to them.
Yeah, I like that a lot, for especially like, hey, if you take the phone call, like
Right.
you're responsible. Maybe I'm the one who scheduled, like, hey, I scheduled the client, I spoke with them. So I want to make sure that I'm the one also calling to confirm their meeting. Like that makes it so creating user is going to ensure that it's going to assign to me. And I always like to make sure that creating user does not mean the person who built the template. It's the person who is initiating and taking the template live.
Exactly. And so there's a question here about, will Redtail provide, or will Redtail add any additional roles? And I mean, I'm guessing the answer is no, but I'll tell you how we mitigate that. Go ahead, Curtis. What were you going to say?
The answer currently is right now, there is not an option for more roles, but I wink, wink, see it in the future.
Amazing. Okay, that's good news. But in the interim, we just get really creative with the current roles. And so if your firm, like if your advisor is never going to use a workflow, let's not use that advisor role for the advisor that's never going to use the workflow. Let's redefine what these things mean and make them make sense for your firm. Everything that we're going to show you here today is just best practice, what we see done most commonly. But if you work in a unique situation, just adapt this stuff, make it make sense for your firm, and document it on your style guide. So you have like a written procedure of like what these fields mean so that everybody on your team is using them consistently.
Absolutely. Documenting, especially like the style guide situation, is exactly what should be done. Because again, it's like, hey, we all need to be on the same page. That page that you all are on is your style guide. All right. Like if it's there, that is the procedure.
That's literally the page.
Yeah.
Okay, so step 1, bada boom. Okay, we're gonna move on to step 2 here. You guys see all the scrolling that I'm doing? This is another one of those reasons why I said build the workflow outside of Redtail first, because there's a lot of scrolling here. It's not the most user-friendly system. You can't shift things around easily. I can't take tasks out of step 2 and move them to step 1. Moving things around is a royal pain in the butt. Sorry, Curtis.
I share the understanding and frustration of that. And again, I can only see like better things or improvements are coming. I'd say better improvements are coming for that experience.
I can appreciate that.
Mainly because I can tell you I'm a very loud person over here.
All right, so step 2 is day of stuff. All right, so the conference room needs to be prepped. what goes into prepping the conference room. I got to make this foolproof because we got a brand new, not that our CSA is a fool, but we need to make this thorough enough that he or she can do the job. Okay. And so here's the checklist that they need to follow to make this happen. All right. One of the things to keep in mind here, the reason that I'm showing you how to build out these 2 steps is you can't put outcomes in until you have a subsequent step. And I want to show you how outcomes work. So step 1 was due 3 days before. Step 2 is due on the target date. And like we saw in the whiteboarding document, there's a couple of outcomes because sometimes we have virtual meetings and sometimes we have in-person meetings. So these outcomes are the fork in the road that we've been talking about, and they live here. So the first outcome is, all right, we've done what we needed to do here to prepare, and it's going to be a virtual meeting. Oh shoot, I got to put in one more step. I'm glad you guys can see my brain working here. If it's a virtual meeting,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say in regards to like, I just wanted to mention, because we were mentioning like the task name and that description, but I think we already mentioned that. I apologize. I was taking us the wrong direction.
No,
but
you're
yes,
fine.
We definitely, that fork in the road means there's 2 options to go to. If I'm on step 1, yes, I either want to go to step 2, or it's called step 3, but really you don't always have to think of it linear. Like I'm either going to 1 or 3. Sorry, that was wrong too. I'm either going to step 2 or to step 3, and then either those can join at step 4 together. But originally with outcomes, technically outcomes are optional. Like you do not need to have outcomes, but if you don't, you have less control over the way it's going. I always like to tell people with the whiteboarding process, start in a perfect world. Like, hey, in a perfect world, we always prep, execute, follow up. We never go in any other direction. It always is prep, execute, follow up. Nobody has ever canceled. Nobody has ever rescheduled. We have always gone in this order, and nothing has ever gone wrong for us ever. If you live in that world, you don't need outcomes technically. But we all live in a very imperfect world where different things happen and occur. And this is just what allows us to essentially prepare for those forks in the road that we're going to come to.
I can appreciate that. And in this example, we're going to have 2 outcomes here. Okay. We're either going to move forward to prepare the conference room, or in this situation, this is the virtual outcome. So we're going to move forward to the day of follow up as a result of that meeting. People will ask here, well, shouldn't the next step be have the meeting? I have done workflows before where the step is have the meeting. It's redundant. It's unnecessary. It causes a bottleneck. So we literally go from prep to post. Okay. Yep. So prep, we got what we need to do. Post meeting, we need to follow up, put in our notes, put in our action items. Okay. So in this virtual situation, we're going to bypass the conference room prep, and we're just going to move straight forward to the review meeting follow-up process. I'm going to save it.
And again, on that of, you know, you don't need a step for the meeting, because again, this workflow is supporting the activity of the meeting we're creating. Right. So that meeting of when it's happening technically already exists. The job of the workflow is to make sure that we prep, execute, and follow up the tasks that happen outside of the meeting.
I appreciate that. And so then the logical next one is, if it's in person, we're going to move to the conference room prep. Okay. So you can see here now, first thing that happens 3 days before is we prep. As once I complete that step, which I'm going to show you, I'm going to work through the workflow live here in just a second. I'm going to get the fork in the road. I'm either going to move forward with prepping the conference room. Okay. The task is there, or I'm going to move straight forward to the follow-up. Okay. And one thing I also wanted to point out here, did you see how I had another outcome here, which is the review meeting prep, which is the same step that I'm on. So to Curtis's point, if it's like meeting rescheduled, like you can make this step loop until it makes sense to proceed, yep, which I think is really slick. Absolutely. Conversation for a different time.
One thing I always like to tell people, I think at a bare minimum when using outcomes, at a bare minimum, there needs to be at least 2. And mainly like, the first one should always be the perfect world scenario. Hey, I want to go from step 1 to step 2. Now, if I have other options, like, oh, I can also go to step 3, maybe one that goes to step 4. Like, yeah, if you have other steps, But the second one that I always like to tell people, make sure you have, is an outcome that allows you to end the process at any point.
Love
Because
that.
if we started, hey, we're doing the review meeting prep and somebody cancels, you know, maybe you do have a process that you want to get that rescheduled, but if they cancel, they're not ready to rebook, things like that. I don't necessarily want to delete the workflow because it's already started. I don't want to mark things as complete because they didn't happen. So having an outcome allow me to end it even on step 1, on step 2, step 3, just gives me those options. I also believe that we get a lot of questions of like, hey, I accidentally completed a step. How do I go back? You know, you can even program that in beforehand, and you can just say, just because you can have multiple outcomes. You can have like 20 outcomes if you want. I haven't seen that many yet, but you can just call it go back a step. And if you build that in there, you're just prepared. Another thing that, my dad worked in construction, and one of the things he said was, if you prepare for all the things that can go wrong, at the end of the day, you can say everything went according to plan.
Love that.
Same situation here. If we plan for every single thing that could go wrong and takes a different direction, we're still on track for what we want to do.
I love that. And so that also goes back to the whole whiteboarding concept, right? You can't possibly know everything your first stab at this. It's helpful to jot all this down first. And so you guys, I'm cheating here. I'm going to go back to I'm going to go to the finished review meeting workflow. I'm not going to bore everybody by typing this whole thing in, but you can see here, I got step 1 all built out. I got my step 2 with the conference room prep. I got step 3 with the review meeting follow-up, sending the follow-up email, adding all my notes to the contact record. Okay, these are all the follow-up things that need to happen. That's a reminder of how to execute on this review meeting. All right, updating the contact record. You can see here, I've got a hyperlink here. If there's like documents to reference or agendas to reference in your cloud-based server, you can hyperlink those documents here. Okay, here's all of the follow-ups. What if you make notes during the meeting? Would you be able to add the meeting to the workflow in that case so the advisor can attach the notes directly? We'll go back to that. I don't totally understand what that means. Notes get added after the meeting directly to Redtail, whether you type them out or you use FinMate or some sort of AI bot to push them in. But this is what a complete workflow template looks like. I want to show you how to use this in real life. All right. So I'm a real big fan, for those of you who've been following along for a while, of an online calendar tool called G-Reminders. If you use Calendly, fine. There's a manual way of doing this. But I just want to show you an example. So we've got the review meeting workflow built. I have a review meeting calendar link so that when a client wants to schedule a review meeting, or better yet, when I proactively reach out to my clients to schedule the review meeting, I can send them a link to my calendar so they have visibility to my availability. All right, so there's not this back and forth, hey Curtis, you available next Tuesday at 9? Okay, there's none of that back and forth stuff. Curtis
Honestly, when I switched to a calendar scheduler, like, it saved so much time. The amount of emails of going back and forth are just a waste. There's so many ways you can do it.
And so in my experience, moving to a calendar like this saves your administrative team at minimum like 10 hours a week in manual back and forth scheduling. So this is what it looks like. I have a review meeting link built. Okay, you can see my availability. I've structured at 9, 11, and 1 o'clock. So the client, they can now view my calendar and see, okay, great. Kate's next availability is Tuesday at 11 o'clock or Thursday at 9:30. Great. I talk with my spouse. We can both meet on Thursday at 9:30. I'm going to use my gal, Maggie Investor, as my example client today. But I've sent Maggie my link. She, spoke with her husband and they're liking the 9:30 spot on Thursday. Her email address is something like this. She wants to get a text, she can put in her number. Okay, you can see where we're going to be meeting, or we can meet on Zoom or whatever you guys use. All of this lives in the G-Reminders link that the client can select their specification. And then I'm going to schedule it. Slowly but surely. Okay, client can push this to their calendar, client can forward it to their spouse. And the beautiful thing is now when I go back to my calendar for next week, what do you know? I've got a review meeting scheduled with Maggie Investor. And I want to point out a couple of things here while we're on my calendar page, okay? I have it color coded so that I can see what types of meetings do I have very clearly, resonates in my brain. And my calendar is very well structured. I've got time blocks on my Redtail calendar for when I need to work on, a project or when I'm on family vacation, so that GReminders reads my Redtail calendar and only shows slots when I'm available. So if you need to time block, you do it on your Redtail calendar, which is really easy and simple rather than creating some like complex calendar and GReminders. Okay. And the one thing I want to point out here that I think is really slick is, first of all, you can see very clearly that it's a call with Maggie Investor and myself, or a meeting with Maggie Investor and myself. It links to Maggie's contact record. So now when I go to Maggie's contact record, I'm going to refresh this here. What do you know? You can see that we have a review meeting scheduled with Maggie next Thursday at 9:30. And you want to see the slickest part of it all? Look what got launched.
Ooh, a workflow. Love that.
It's a review meeting workflow. What do you know? All right. And so now I can go to my review meeting workflow, open this guy up. Courtney on my team is the client service person, so she's going to prepare the documents for the meeting. All right, there's my checklist. I'm hovering over it. You can click on it. This should look familiar now. We've done it on the whiteboarding document. We wrote it out in the workflow template. Okay, she's done everything she needs to do. She can complete it. And you see it's coming up. I'm going to go back for a second. Coming up 3 days before that target date.
I was gonna say, I saw a question about like, we mentioned that hyperlink. If you click on that task again, I just want to show them like how you can add that. So, and even if a live workflow, you can manipulate anything that's there. But if you do need to add a link, you just click that hyperlink button that's in that little top, and you can type in the web address. Or again, like if you have like, files online, this is strictly, it has to be a web-based link. And then you can actually, again, just easy reference. And it's just going to be like, hey, we need to go here for this part of the process. You need to log into this website. It just makes it a little easier and faster.
Andrea asked a good question. How did the workflow get launched? Magic. No, it's we set up an automation in GReminders that when you use the review meeting link in GReminders, it's smart enough to recognize the corresponding workflow in Redtail, because we've set up an automation so it knows to trigger the corresponding workflow. And if that's a whole nother conversation on how to build out GReminders. We have all sorts of helpful trainings on how to do that. But yeah, we set that up on the GReminder side to automatically trigger the workflow in Redtail.
Now, right? I would like to, for those of you who aren't using like a calendar scheduler, like if you're still doing emails, that's totally fine. Redtail does have the same options that you can build internally as well. You can say, hey, anytime I add an activity for a client review meeting, I want my client review workflow to start. Like, so those are things you can build in automation templates. But I do love, and again, to push for GReminders, like it gives you those options of building those types of automations in their program as well. But if you're not using them, we also have them in Redtail.
And let's just show them for just a second. So where I clicked on my name, I clicked on manage my account, I went to my templates. I'm under my automation templates. So you can create a local automation. So if I add an activity and the category is whatever, it's automatically going to launch the corresponding workflow. This is why naming convention and consistency is so important. To Curtis's point, you can set up local automations. We just do it through GReminders because it's really freaking slick. So, okay, I'm going to go back to my workflow for just a second. Courtney has completed this step. She's done. Okay, not a good example. Come on, Redtail. I'm going to refresh here.
Refreshing.
She has completed the step.
There we go.
Outcomes. What are we doing here, Curtis? Are we going to have an in-office meeting or are we going to do it virtually?
Well, I believe on when you booked it, you booked it on in person. So I think we're doing in office. Now, when I do like to point out that you'll see there's a note section for those outcomes.
Yes.
I always like to encourage people that at the bare minimum, write the word done, put like a period in there, something like, even if you don't want to write like a full-on note, because what will happen is it'll actually preserve the date and timestamp of when it actually got completed, and you'll be able to see the history. Now, again, like these step notes inside of the workflow are different than regular notes in the contact. At any point in time, and I know this question came up, was, hey, like what if we're during a meeting? Do I just add the note directly, or can I add it in the workflow? The note should always go directly into the contact. And because of that create button up at the top right, at any time, doesn't matter where you are, you can always add a note. Again, if it's about the process, or add that in the link notes inside the activity, like you want to keep it for, this is for the client review. The step notes that you're selecting with those outcomes should really be, why did you choose this outcome? You're telling the system why you're choosing the direction you're going. And again, this is just about being clear so we can be kind to everybody else of like, this is why we went this way.
And that's a huge benefit of using a workflow, is being able to pick up where somebody else left off. So if Curtis is out, the client calls in and has a question about where we're at on a Benny change, I can pick up Curtis's workflow, and hopefully he's put in some notes there where I can see like, oh, he's hung up here because of this, or whatever the situation might be. That's a huge benefit. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Absolutely.
For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of crank through here, but we now got our prep tasks. Courtney knows what she needs to do here. She's going to complete this, and we're going to move on to the next step in our review meeting checklist or review meeting workflow. Here's a good example of how this workflow is going to pass hands. I think I'm the advisor role on this contact record, so I'm going to send the follow-up email. I'm going to put in the meeting notes. And then Courtney's going to make sure the contact record's beautiful, that things are updated. She's going to, review my notes and make sure that everything looks orderly. And I like to check in with my clients in between our meeting cadence. So I want to make sure that I have a check-in activity set at a specific time. All right. So I think these workflow templates are helpful. I do not think templates alone are your solution. I think you should take our templates. I think you should take our whiteboarding documents. I think you should brainstorm, what does your desired experience look like? What are your firm's or your custodial requirements? Those differ firm to firm. Your client service experience differs firm to firm. And so take what you like of this conversation and put some love into it and make it your own, okay? And that goes into like your follow-up email. Okay, I can copy and paste this email into my email and wordsmith it and send it out to my clients. I can put it in as an email template and send it directly from the Redtail contact record if you have your email synced. Like, you guys need to explore the functionality and figure out what makes the most sense for your team. And when you first start building this out, you need to give yourself some grace. They ain't going to be perfect your first go around. Okay, the best time to write a workflow is when you're in the thick of it. So if workflows are frustrating at the beginning, that's normal. Like this is new. They've not been tested yet. When you put them in a real environment, that is the best time to figure out like, where are their friction points? How can we make these better? And give yourself a little bit of time to perfect them and know that they're like a living, breathing thing that are going to continue to evolve. Give yourself that grace.
Absolutely. I also, because like you're on this follow-up step here, because like you said, like, yeah, templates are great, but they are not the end solution to everything. And even if we said like, hey, we planned for everything that could go wrong, all this stuff, there's still some things that you cannot plan for. So
Sure.
even especially if you have a step that's like about follow-up for a meeting, a lot of the times, hey, like the follow-up includes assigning out tasks for other people to do. I like to point out, if those tasks are about the client review workflow that we're doing, at any point in time, without affecting the original template, to the left of it, where it says review meeting follow-up, you can choose that action button and you can add a task, and you can add extra tasks of saying, hey, there's this extra thing I need to do, and assign out to somebody. And again, that just means like it's just for Margaret. It's not for somebody else because she had a special situation. It just is still adding that information so everybody knows, hey, there's still more we need to do.
I appreciate that.
Even I've seen in templates, people put follow-up and just, they add blank tasks because they know there's a minimum of 3 things that change and vary, for everything else. Or maybe if you're saying at max, we do these 10 things, but not everybody gets them.
Yep.
Put them in the workflow. And if it's not needed, you can delete a task from a template if it's already active. Hey, we don't need it for this person. Because if it's in there and you have it marked as complete, it's just lying to the system by saying you did something that didn't actually happen.
That's great feedback. And I want to show a couple of other things here, Curtis, because we used automations and stuff to do this. I want to show people how to launch workflows manually.
Yes.
I also want to point out here, this is not a great example because there's 2 people on this, but if it was like me all the way down, you can complete the step in bulk. So you can eliminate 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks, right? So you can complete the step in bulk. The workflow ends.
Yep.
And now I've got a nice little overview here of like, what did we do? You can see that, we did this on this date, everything's timestamped. All right, I think that's really slick. If you're not a GReminders user, if you do not have workflows, automation set up just yet, that's all good. You can literally, if you get someone to schedule a review meeting next Tuesday or whatever, you can manually launch workflows directly from the contact record, okay? So we go to this quick add button here, go to workflows. There's a question here. Can you use workflow templates while they're under construction? No, don't do that because they're under construction. They're not complete.
The only ones that'll show here is if it's marked as active. If it's under construction, it will not show as a template.
Okay, so I went to my create button here.
Yep. Actually,
workflows. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, go and click on workflows. This ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning of when you're building the template and you're saying filling out the owner, filling out the category, filling out when the target date is. That's what this pop-up is. And you can override, even if you select a template, you can override those things. Oh, hey, for this instance, I need to change the owner, or I need to change the category, or again, change the target date. That's what the template is doing, is just pre-filling out these fields for you. So you don't have to remember.
Love that. So there is an option available to launch workflows manually. If you can't tell, we're kind of geeks about this stuff. We absolutely love using workflows for all of the repeatable things that you do in an effort to streamline operations, deliver a better client service experience, give your team the confidence to know what's expected of them. There's so many valuable things to take away from this. We're like 5 minutes to the top of the hour, Curtis. I'm happy to run a little bit longer if you want to hang out. I'd love to answer some questions.
I have a very easy day, so let's do it. Let's get those questions.
Okay. Let's answer some questions. Actually, I'm going to stay in Redtail, and then I'll just say this too, guys. I want to do another follow-up session, just like a Ask Me Anything. I don't know if Curtis wants to hang out with me and have that conversation too, but like we've gone through a lot today from the first conversation to now that I think it would be nice to hear from you guys. What clicked, what didn't click, what do people have questions on? But
should we tell them like if they just how to reach us and get extra information as well?
Oh yeah, please. Good call.
So if anybody gets to a point where just saying, I want to talk this out, I have questions, things like that. Anybody has the ability just to email us training@redtailtechnology.com. You can even just go, if you're in Redtail and you click the question mark, there's even like a submit a training request button. You can fill out a form, or again, just email training@redtailtechnology.com. That comes to us. It gets assigned out to a trainer, and we will send you, we don't use GReminders. We actually might be soon, but we use Calendly. We'll send you a Calendly link that goes on our calendar. We can meet. We just wanted, so again, we are not the people who are saying this is what your process should be, but we're the people who can say, hey, this can work for the structure of what you're trying to do. Things like that. I can't tell you what should be your tasks, but I can help you build out, by, picking your brain to figure it out as well.
I learned everything I know from the Redtail training team. So start there. And when you need advice on what should your steps be, what should your tasks be, we got you covered. I want to jump into the questions here, Curtis, because there's some really good ones. I'll come back to this slide and leave it up for a couple minutes when we wrap here so that everyone has Curtis and my contact info. But let's jump back into Redtail for just a second. is there a way to see, is there a report where you can see workflow tasks that are delayed or stuck in one place? Yes. As the operations manager, I used this a lot. There's a couple of different things that I want to point out here. So across the top, you can see I've got my 4 most commonly used tabs here in Redtail, my calendar, my today page with all my action items. If you go to your today page, and look in the top right corner, these are all of your specific workflows that are assigned to you, and you can see what's upcoming, what's past due. If you want to see your firm's workflows, you can click here and see all open workflows for your entire organization. You can see, shoot, someone's really lagging here, okay? So that gives you a good overview. And then in terms of reports here, Curtis, I'll let you dive into this, but click on reports on the left here.
Yeah, so on the reports page, you would scroll down to if we're looking for workflows, and then we have the workflow reports. There's 2 options, workflow report and workflow task report. And sort of think about this like, do I care about the step or do I care about the tasks? Again, the step is where am I at in the process, and the tasks are what needs to happen so I can move from step to step. So if you're just, more so if you're just saying, where am I at? The workflow report is normally where you would go, but more commonly, and I will say the workflow report and just the workflows page on the left-hand side do very much the similar thing. So when Kate said, go to workflows on the left navigation menu, you can sort by current step due. That is the best place. But if you're just saying what individual tasks are behind, ahead, that's going to be the workflow task report at the bottom right-hand corner.
Perfect.
And what's true about every single report that you have in Redtail is as soon as you click it, you can go to the filter button in the top right-hand corner, and that is what allows you to control what the report is showing you.
You can see the offenders, you can see the whole deal.
Yeah. It can be like, hey, Curtis has worked with us for years. He's always behind those things. He's always behind. I need to go narrow down and just see what is he not doing. Like that's what you can narrow it down. You can be as specific or general as you want just to see where are the tasks at.
Okay. Do you have a sample style guide? That's an easy question. I'll show you really quick. On our website, simplicityoperations.com, go to resources, go to free downloads. You'll see all of our free everythings. You can sign up for our newsletter. You'll find our Redtail style guide here. You can download that, edit it, make it your own. Yes, there's a sample style guide available. I'm going to complete that one, Curtis. I'll get into the automation thing in just a second. I like this one. Andrea says, can you edit a workflow not at the template level? So like you were just saying, if I go back to Maggie's contact, I'm just going to launch a workflow here really quick. Slow. Or maybe I'm just moving at the speed of light because I've had so much coffee. The answer is yes. Yeah. If a workflow gets launched and you need to make edits after the workflow has been launched, you can open this guy up. You can add details. You can change the person. You can change the date. You can add additional tasks, steps, whatever, like you were saying.
Even the outcomes. Anything that you can change or manipulate in a template, you can change in the live workflows as well. Because again, like a template is just a starting off point. All the template is doing is saying, I'm going to fill out these fields for you. But just like a note, just like an activity, if I use a note template, I can change things about it before I save the note. If it's an activity template, I can always constantly change things about it. It's just helping you not to have to fill out so many fields.
Okay, these are such good questions. Okay, one thing I do want to say, Curtis, on that is keep in mind, okay, so yes, you can edit a workflow, well, after it's been launched. Keep in mind, if you edit the template, it doesn't affect workflows retroactively. It will affect all workflows going forward, but not workflows that have already been launched. Yep. That causes confusion. Okay. Can you batch create workflows? I'm going to answer this 2 ways. I'm going to read between the lines here a little bit. You can batch launch workflows by running a quick list and bulk actioning and launching review meeting workflows to all 10 people that you're meeting with this week. You can do that. But to my knowledge, Curtis, you can't batch create workflows. But what you can do is you can go to your workflow templates, you can find a workflow that is similar to the new process that you want to create, and you can just clone it. So when you open this guy up, you just need to change the language and make it make sense for whatever process you're trying to write.
Yeah. But if you're trying to like batch start workflows, like, hey, I want to start everybody like on a cadence call workflow, or like a client review, when you do a bulk add, like you can say, here's all the contacts and I want to start a workflow. Normally that I wouldn't suggest that, because if you say, hey, here's 30 people that I want to start a workflow for, it'll just start one workflow with all 30 contacts attached to that single workflow. And so that means like if you're saying, yeah, I'm doing all of their tasks at the same time, that's fine. That could work. I'd never really seen that be something somebody wanted to do, but it's going to put 30 people on one workflow. There is a workaround though, and it's using the automations. So if, for instance, you say, hey, I'm going to add an activity to these 30 people, and if that activity launches the workflow, then I'll have 30 individual workflows. So like there is a way around it. And again, like we can talk that out. Like if you want to talk with one of the trainers, we're all familiar with that as well.
Okay. Let me, you were talking about automations. There's a couple questions about automations. How do you manage multiple advisors' calendars? Well, we use the Redtail calendar. We also have GReminders set up for all of our advisors. GReminders is really smart. Calendly is really smart. You can create teams. So if Curtis and I are both the advisors, our team link is only going to show availability for when Curtis and I are both available. So that's how we manage multiple advisors' calendars. I'm going to kind of bang through these really quick, Curtis. What are the asterisks used for? That's for internal purposes for our Simplicity Ops clients. An asterisk indicates an automation. So I'll talk about automations here now, because this has come up a couple of times. So you saw the automation for meeting types. Okay, so our automations are set up through GReminders. So when a meeting schedule, it automatically launches the corresponding meeting workflow. We do the same thing for activities. So as a result of that review meeting, I had a conversation with a client and I realized that a Benny needs to get changed. I go to my activities, I select the Benny change. You can see the asterisk here indicates that there is a corresponding workflow for this activity template. Okay, I open this guy up.
I love the idea of that asterisk. It's just, again, like you're being clear about this does something else other than just add the activity. It's a really great idea.
You can see here, this activity is linked via an automation. So here's the information that I need to plug in here. I'm the advisor. I need to communicate with my team. Everything that they need to know to make this Benny change happen. I'm going to task it off to the person on my team who does it. I'm going to save this activity. And now what do you know? There's another workflow open. A Benny change workflow. And the Benny change workflow walks me through step by step by step how to execute the Benny change request. And so this is how you're able to tie activities to workflows. Once the workflow is complete, however, I have to go back to the activity and complete the activity. This is a conversation for a whole nother time about task management and how to use activities in combination with workflows. But this is high level, how the two can play very nicely together and how you can get advisors to adopt workflows by making this process as easy on them as possible, so that they're not having to remember to launch workflows in addition to adding activities.
Absolutely. And the automation feature in Redtail, again, is, I always like to describe it. I think it was a math class where we had to do if-then statements, like if this, then that. I want to say that was like algebra or something. I realized I'm almost at my 20-year high school reunion, so apparently I'm not 22 anymore. But I remember in algebra, if this, then that. That's what an automation is. If I add an activity, then start a workflow. If I change a status, then start a workflow. You can build those in our automation templates, and it just, again, is just making sure that I don't have to do things. I don't want to create an activity and also hit the button to create a workflow. Right. I can do less work. I advocate for the bare minimum as much as possible.
And so let's show them, Curtis, where the automation templates live. So I went under my name. I showed this earlier, but I just want to drive this point home. Manage your account. All your templates live here. Those email templates I was talking about, but we're concerned about our automation templates. And you can see my Benny change. Okay, I've made this foolproof again. Okay, clear is kind. I like that better than foolproof. Sounds a whole lot nicer. Do this action. I'm going to link this workflow, the Benny change workflow. This is again, is why consistency is so key here, you guys. If all conditions are true, if the activity category is equal to Benny change, it's going to link the Benny change workflow. Okay, and so we've set that up for all of the repetitive things that we do to just streamline the way we operate. All right.
I have to say, I have been so inspired by seeing all of your naming conventions that I think I'm going to spend the rest of my day renaming everything just to be more clear to, and kind to myself.
It helps. It helps like prioritizing in your brain. It helps save you time. I can't tell you how valuable that is. So you said something, Curtis, that someone had a question about. How do the workflow, what did she say? How does the complete workflow show up in notes? So I'm going to go to Maggie's notes.
And then if you click the workflow summary, and actually from the main page, we can see it as well. But if you click workflow summary, and then apply, that'll show us anytime a workflow is completed, a note gets created, and it'll just say, hey, the workflow review meeting was completed at this day and this time.
I'm going to piggyback on that. There's two things there. Two things that I love, hate about Redtail. I never turn all of these on. I only ever leave my default as note. If I ever wanted to look up the workflow summary, I can go here and look it up by clicking this button. But if you turn all of these on, imagine like a 10-year client and the amount of notes and tasks and activities that are going to show up on this page is extremely overwhelming. So I like to filter it down and simplify it by just keeping my notes open. If I ever needed to do additional digging, I can go to the workflow summary and click that button on. And to Curtis's point, I also can go to Maggie's name here and I can go to latest notes and I can see all of her notes here. I don't know why I hate this page. It's too busy for my simple brain. I like to see it clean here. And the other thing is you can go under more on Maggie's contact record and you can go to her workflows and you can see all open workflows. You can see all completed workflows. You've got a whole lot of capabilities here.
And actually from this page, like if you go and if you click on complete, I mean, in all honesty, let's say like you should see for like a contact, you should see their prospecting workflow, their onboarding workflow, a client review workflow for every year that they've been a client, an account opening workflow for every, account that's ever been opened. And you're just going to see, here's every single process I've ever taken this client through. And again, it's just listing it out and what that service is you're providing them. You'll see it listed out here.
Somebody had a question about roles, and since we're here, I'm going to show you how to add roles to somebody's contact record. So in order for roles to work, you have to have very clear defined roles on your team. So if you have multiple client service people, it needs to be very clear that Curtis services this part of the book and I service this part of the book, so that we can run a report, at the category level and say, I need all tier 1 clients so that I can bulk assign the role client service person to Curtis. Okay, so your office needs to be that organized. If you are not that organized, work on it.
And honestly, if it's always just, hey, I'm the only person who does this role for all the clients, what you're going to be doing is like just assign to teams, like Kate was saying.
Yes.
If you are the only person who does that, the responsibility of a part of that, just use teams. But if it's dependent on whoever the client is,
right,
oh, hey, that's Kate's client, I need her to take care of that, versus, oh, that's my client, I need to take care of that. The role's just to help assign to who is servicing the client as opposed to who's just responsible for the job.
Yes, it's contact specific. And so where the roles live on the contact is under more and under permissions and roles. And you can see here, I can change, I'm going to edit roles. I'm the advisor. Courtney is the associate advisor. Okay, whatever. Levbert is the client service person. You can edit the roles. Hopefully you don't have to do this contact by contact. I want to show you where it lives on the contact record, but you can also do it in bulk. I'm not going to get into that today because we've got a bunch of other questions that I want to help answer.
No, yeah, but
Um,
assigning those roles in bulk, if it's something you haven't used, you can absolutely assign in bulk. We can help you if you want to reach out after that as well.
Yeah, it's a bulk action if you're able to run an advanced search. You said something about launching activities. Okay. Oh wow, we're getting to the end here, you guys. Good questions. Can I copy the same workflow into 20 different databases in the firm? You sure can. As long as you are the database owner or your database owner gives Redtail the permission, you can email the Redtail import team and say, hey, I'm the database owner. Here's the name of my database. Can you please copy all these databases that live in my database and send them to Bob Jones, who's another advisor in my database. Here's their username and email address and specifics. They'll do a security check. Am I right, Curtis?
Yeah, so you can even start it with that little bubble in the bottom right. If you just want to start the conversation and just tell the support agent, hey, I want to copy it over to this. And like you mentioned, if we have to copy something to somebody else's database, we can even reach out to them and do the security check, things like that. If you want to share your workflows and you tell people, again, like you just need to let us know so we can take your information. We just can't move information from one database to the other without clear, clear approval from both databases. I will preface this. Kate, all the templates you have, incredible. Redtail does have, we call them our Redtail University workflow templates as well. We have those, and I will say, I'm teasing this again. There is a workflow template library coming. So in the next month or so, maybe a little bit, when you go to the workflow templates, you'll be able to say, hey, I want a client review meeting workflow and just have it copied in. And again, our templates are not, this is how it should be. It's just strictly suggestion. You still need to make sure you understand the whiteboarding side of it so you can build it out for your specific processes.
Great feedback. Great conversation, Curtis. You are an angel. Thank you so much for hanging out. We've answered all of the questions. We had 26 questions and quite the chat. I appreciate everybody hanging out today. I hope this was valuable. I very much appreciate all of the feedback and the questions that I love the engagement that we're getting. Curtis and I will talk about a date for a follow-up, kind of like an Ask Me Anything if you're up for the combo, Curtis.
Love that. I'm in for that.
But let's keep the conversation going. Happy workflow writing to everybody. If we can be of assistance, you've got our contact information. Would love to help you all dial in your Redtail. So we'll see you guys hopefully next month to continue the convo.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Kate. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Curtis. Adios, guys.
Bye.